Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the hidden rules of human communication.
So let's just dive right in with a big question, one that people have been wrestling with forever. When you try to persuade someone, are you really just guiding them toward the truth? Or are you just using words to manipulate them? Well, it turns out the answer might be hiding in a pretty unexpected place.
And that place is inside this number, positive 0.1062. I know, it looks like something you just ignore in a spreadsheet, but it's actually a massive clue. It's a signal we pulled from a global poll of over 400 people, and it's going to help us crack this whole thing open.
Okay, so what is this number actually trying to tell us? Let's decode this thing.
What this number reveals is a really interesting link. It shows that the more a person's worldview is built on things like order and duty, we'll get into that in a second, the more they tend to value persuasive writing. Now, that might sound a little backward at first, right? Why would people who are all about the rules care so much about the art of persuasion?
So that specific mindset, it has a name. In a model called spiral dynamics, it's known as the blue vMEME. Now, don't worry about the jargon. Just think of a vMEME as a kind of psychological operating system that shapes how we see everything. And this blue operating system, it's all about stability, clear rules, personal responsibility, and a very strong absolute sense of right and wrong. It's the part of us that believes in structure and living by a code.
So that brings us back to our question. Why would a mindset that's so structured and rule-based give a hoot about persuasion? Well, the answer is all about how it defines persuasion in the first place. In this quote, this just nails it. For someone thinking from this blue mindset, persuasion isn't about tricking someone or winning an argument for the sake of it. It's about using words to bring clarity. It's about aligning everyone with what is fundamentally right and principled. Words aren't weapons. They're tools for building a more orderly, moral world.
And look at this. This is where our little number, the plus 0.1062, starts to make perfect sense. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. You see a clear pattern here, a negative correlation with asking for help. That means a preference for self-reliance. A positive one for breaking things down into steps, a love of structure. A positive one for listening, a respect for discipline. Valuing persuasion fits right in. It's just another structure tool for communicating a principled worldview.
Now, to really understand this blue mindset, I think it helps to see what it's not. So let's put it side by side with a very different communication style.
All right, meet the orange vMEME. If blue is about order and principle, orange is all about achievement, success, and getting results. For this mindset, persuasion is a tool for selling, for negotiating, for winning. And check out the data. It shows an even stronger correlation, a plus 0.1813. So you see the difference. They both value persuasion, but for totally different reasons. Blue uses it for moral articulation, orange uses it to close the deal. Same tool, completely different code.
So why does any of this matter? I mean, it's interesting, sure, but what's the point? Well, these subtle differences aren't just trivia. They are actually the key to predicting human behavior.
You see, all these little numbers, these correlations, they're not just describing the world as it is. They're the raw ingredients that feed into some incredibly sophisticated models that can actually forecast how people will react. We can move from just observing people to predicting what they'll do.
Think of it like this. A manager decides to introduce a new policy. That decision is like a single beam of light. It then passes through a psychological prism made up of thousands of these correlations. And what comes out the other side isn't one single reaction. The prism splits the light, showing a whole spectrum of predicted responses based on all the different value systems on the team.
Okay, cool analogy, but let's get real. How does putting a decision through this so-called prism actually change anything in a real company?
This chart shows us a classic problem, what you might call a Tower of Babel scenario. You've got management over here running on that red and orange energy. They're all about power and results. And then you've got the staff operating mostly from blue and yellow. They need rules. They value safety. They want to feel competent. They are fundamentally speaking different languages.
So, management, speaking their orange language, offers up big bonuses for hitting some really aggressive targets. They think they're providing this amazing incentive, but the staff hears this through their blue and yellow filters, and all they hear is risk, anxiety. What if the incentives are designed poorly? The whole thing backfires. Their psychological currencies just don't line up. But, and here's the magic, the model can find the bridge. It can find the one area of common ground. In this case, it's the shared green value of community. The only way to connect is to stop talking about individual bonuses and start talking about succeeding as a team.
And this ability to see and then bridge these invisible communication gaps,
Well, it offers a totally new blueprint for what it means to be a leader.
This brings us to a kind of wild, almost unsettling idea. Could an algorithm actually be more empathetic than a human leader? I mean, a manager can't help but project their own values onto their team. But an algorithm? It can process the psychological profiles of 5,000 people at once, without bias. It can achieve a kind of empathy at scale, calculating the real emotional impact of a decision across an entire company.
So we come all the way back to our first question about persuasion, truth, and manipulation, but now we see it so much deeper. The real code of communication is about understanding these deep value systems, and that leaves us with one last, huge thought to chew on. If something as fundamentally human as empathy can be computed, what else is just waiting to be decoded?